Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another Top Cut breakdown video. In today's video, we have two-ish events to go over today, maybe more so like 1.5. And the only reason I say that is because for one of the tournaments, I don't really have a ton of data to go off of, but we will mention it briefly because I always want to get as much coverage for as many different regions as I possibly can, even if it's just, you know, worth mentioning in passing. But today, we'll go over the Zenkai Cup that took place over the weekend, hosted by PPG. We'll try to make some inferences as we move into at least US Nationals and all the regions that are kind of following the same format as us. The other tournament we have is the Italian Nationals, which we'll go over very, very quickly because unfortunately, the only thing that I know about the Italian Nationals is that it was won by Sin Shenron. I never saw like a Top Cut breakdown or deck list or anything like that. I heard it was about 80-85 players. Red Sin goes on to win, but that was a pre-set 19 Nationals, if I was reported to correctly. Basically, Red Sin goes on to win a set 18 Nationals, and I believe they also did not have the ban list implemented either. Now, I don't know that for a fact, but I know that that was a thing they were doing in some parts of Europe. Again, I don't know if Italy specifically applies to that, but I'm pretty sure it does. So yeah, Red Sin basically goes on to win a pure set 18 Nationals over in Italy. Shout out to my Italian brethren. But yeah, I know it wasn't really much to go on, but it's what I had to tell you guys. And again, I want to just get as much exposure out to other regions as I possibly can. But for those of you watching, like if you're in Italy or any region and you get information for, you know, Top Cut breakdowns, feel free to message me on Facebook or Discord. I really do appreciate when people reach out to me with that type of information. Whenever I report on like a non-American event, it's usually because someone from that community reached out to me and gave me the data. So feel free to do that or post it in the Crossworld Discord down in the description. That really does help out. But yeah, PPG, I can't shout them out enough, guys, because they always do a great job of posting their data information from tournaments, you know, with these great graphics, with the deck list posted in very organized, concise ways. Obviously, you can see the link in the URL bar here, but I'll post this in the pinned comment or the description, whichever one I'm feeling when I upload this video. I'll post it in one of those locations so you guys can check out these deck lists. But again, we're going over a Zenkai Cup here. Now, this is not like a true 1-to-1 ratio with like, you know, your Nats testing, because for one, this is not set 19 legal yet. Obviously, in future Zenkai Cups, set 19 will be legal because it's a Zenkai set, but this is a set 18, essentially Zenkai format. But still, like a lot of the decks here are what you're going to be expecting at Nationals. Of course, we have the SS4 Gogeta, which here takes up 6 slots. The Red Sin Shenron, like neither of those are going to change. Like the amount of representation might change, but the fact that these are the two best red decks is not going to change. So it's worth taking a look at some lists here. And there's actually some really interesting lists in the Zenkai Cup that you may very well see at Nationals. So look at those. Reboot Goku got nerfed from the ban list. I'm actually pretty excited to look at this list as well, just to see how people are kind of adapting with the one change where Beerus basically got errated. We have Reboot Cell taking the W here, and we will take a look at that first place list. And we have one Pan squeaking in, as well as one Kid Goku, which is actually one of my favorite decks of Zenkai. So let's go ahead and start looking through the deck list here. We will start with the first place Cell list. Unfortunately, we have the deck list uploaded sideways, which is kind of unfortunate, but I'll be able to at least describe some of the cards. And again, you guys can click on all the links here once you visit this link here, ppgeventmanagement.com. But all right, so going with the Reboot Cell list, of course, this was a BO1 online tournament. So going right off the bat, one interesting note is Kaioken Goku, the tournament pack, which is basically just play it for one as long as you have 3 more energy and your opponent pitches a card. I mean, such a simple but solid hand control option here. Well, I guess let's like look at an overview first though and see like what parts of the Cell engine are we actually playing. So we have 3 of the 4-drop multicolor Cell, where a lot of lists ended up playing 4 back in like you know, 2-3 formats ago when this deck was more popular. This deck seems to trim a bit on some of the Cell engine. Like here we have, you know, 3 of this 1-drop, 4 of this 1-drop, and again 3 of the 4 multicolor 4-drop. And we have 1 of each 8-drop here. So the one that's the you know, the dual attacker, the double blocker, basically. I really don't know the names of these cards if that's not apparent enough. But then we have the older multicolor 8-drop as well, which is basically a negate on legs. I think this card's, you know, pretty weak to removal, but I guess if you're up against like a red matchup that maybe can't -20 in a single shot, which SS4 Gogeta oftentimes can't -20 in a single shot unless they play the black-red Gogeta. So that might be relevant there. I have no idea what this Android 18 does, but I know it's an older card, so that's interesting to see. I think it actually came out in the last Cell starter deck, the one before this one. But again, going through just the Cell part of the deck, I mean, we're definitely making some cuts here. And we're fitting in stuff like 4 copies of Faded Rivals, the Goku at least, and then 2 copies of the Piccolo. So there's your barrier removal / hand control. And this is actually worth noting because, you know, having tested Cell Reboot back in the format where it was relevant, even though green is like the color when it comes to removal and the leader offers you a ton of removal, you didn't really have much in the way of barrier removal, and that's what Fated Rivals does offer this deck. And of course it also adds the hand control element because Piccolo offers hand control and offers unison control and marker removal, so that's pretty solid. Yeah, as far as a modernized way to play Cell Reboot, this is probably it. I mean, I think Fated Rivals is a great inclusion. The new Gohan Rare, probably also a great main deck, if not side deck. I don't think a ton of people are going to play this deck at Nats, but I think if you wanted to, and you wanted to play green, this is probably one of the stronger green decks, and this is probably the way to do it. Pretty cool. Now, another really cool deck, which is, again, Sideways, I promise this is the last of the Sideways decks, I think, is SS4 Gogeta with a very different spin. This build is playing Chain Zeno. This is kind of scary, but we have a lot to talk about here. So, as far as the Chain Zeno stuff goes, I know this because I'm a Dragon Ball freak. This is the one-drop Trunks that came out with the Spaceship GT archetype that just simply draws a card. You can also tuck it under a GT Spaceship, but obviously this deck doesn't play that. So very simple, one-drop draw a card. Your leader can play in rest mode. Your Unison can play in rest mode. So you can get your one-drop Trunks in play for free, which you can then evolve in the Chain Attack, which we can see 2 copies here. Again, I know the outlines of cards by very slight images. Don't flame me in the comments. But yeah, we have 2 copies of Chain Attack here, and then we have 2 copies of Chain Zeno. So what is this build aiming to do? Well, just from the looks of it, a couple things. I mean, one, you still have your typical Gogeta beatdown, which can get your opponent down a low life, especially if Gogeta goes first. I mean, that turn 3 where they can play anything from Defender of Life to burn you, or Rush Attack to hit you with a dual attack, on top of, you know, playing the Double Strike Goku or the critical Vegeta. That's a lot of attacks for a deck to deal with going second, right? When a fair amount of decks are playing Unisons on turn 2 or tapping out for other things on turn 2. Yeah, that can be a lot of pressure. So with that in mind, I mean, this is like a very classic old school Chain Zeno mentality, is like push your opponent down in life as fast as you possibly can and then Chain Zeno them, because typically in this game, when you're doing a lot of damage to your opponent, you're giving them, you know, a lot more hand size. You're bolstering their hand size. Chain Zeno is the great equalizer in that you can reduce your opponent's hand size after giving them a ton of cards. Now, you put your opponent to, let's say, 3 life, and you activate Chain Zeno, you take maybe what's their 13 card hand into a 5 card hand. And the weird side of that, though, is that Gogeta itself is a deck that's known to draw a million cards. So you're also reducing your own hand size. But of course, if you're playing for the Chain Zeno play, you'll play differently. You'll combo more on attacks, you'll make more Z energy, you'll force more damage through. That's how you would do it, because let's just say I have the most efficient Chain Zeno turn possible. I want to combo my entire hand basically into an attack besides the Chain Attack and the Zeno, because I'll combo my whole hand, force my opponent to take a damage. If I'm lucky, they'll go to 2 life, and then bam, evolve Chain Attack. Or, you know, I guess if I really don't want to see it coming, I'll +2 my Unison, play the one-drop Trunks, evolve Chain Zeno, and then go from there, right? That's like the most ideal way to do that. Now, of course, this deck can just play typical Gogeta, and that's one of the crazy things too, is that if I am like playing against Gogeta here and I know they're playing the Chain Zeno engine, maybe it's game 2, or maybe I just know they're playing it for whatever reason, I'd want to defend a lot more early, and I'd probably want to combo more cards early than I typically would, just so that I don't lose to the Chain Zeno. Because again, if you go down a 3-2 life and get your hand reset, you're in a really bad spot. But now on the flip side, if I am just comboing way more than I normally would in the early game, this deck can just adapt and play its regular Gogeta game plan, and now I'm playing with way less cards to defend myself against their onslaught. So it's definitely a pretty interesting build. I think you have to definitely have a lot of practice with it to do well, because you're gonna have to adjust your game plan just as much as your opponent's gonna have to adjust theirs. But yeah, still a crazy build and something you're gonna want to watch out for going into nationals. Of course, this is not without answers though. I mean, both Chain Attack and Zeno and the one drop as well, non-deflect battle cards. So you know, if you're playing the new Vegito deck, let's say, you could of course resolve renew the Zeno. If you're playing, let's say, the mirror match, and maybe you adopted Beerus Ball into your main deck, you could use that if you're at 4 life. So not without answers, but it can be very, very tricky and catch you off guard. So it's worth talking about here. Anyways, though, going on to the 3rd place list. Shout out to Josue, man. Back-to-back 3rd places at online Zenkai Cups. Very cool stuff. So he played Red, Yellow, Sin. I believe the last one he played SS4 Gogeta ramp, so he totally changed it up this time. But yeah, we have our, I guess you could say, typical Red, Yellow, Sin build here. This deck is 100% worth playing Red, Yellow, in my opinion. I really don't think that competitive versions of Sin should be playing Mono Red. Having access to All Might Resistance is just too good, and it's really at no cost to consistency or anything, because you're already playing 2 to 3 copies of Dragon Thunder, so you're already playing a solid yellow card in the deck. And as long as you can basically hold one copy in your hand and charge one copy or do something along those lines of that combination, you can use Almighty Resistance to clean up. Because I think Sin is very weak to floodgates. Like, you can do a crazy amount of damage early on, especially if you go first, but if your opponent ever stabilizes and just floodgates you turn after turn after turn, you will run into problems as Sin. I think having the counter is the way to deal with that. So I think most players are probably playing red yellow Sin now, but if you weren't, I would strongly recommend it. Radiant Sands is a cool tech as well. I mean, for SCR options in Sin, you're pretty limited because you can't play SS4 Gogeta, you can't play any of the black SCRs, so you got to play a red SCR essentially. And Josue here is playing Radiant Sands. This is really cool because I guess you could say it's not as powerful as Vegeta, you know, pay 4, wipe the board, burn them a life, but this is a very aggressive SCR. 2-drop 40k double crit. Like in red mirrors, they typically can't answer this. Like, they cannot minus enough in the early turns to get this thing off the board, which is kind of wild. The one copy of Vegeta Royal Evolution, you can do some neat things like playing around Flying Nimbus, or just you know, getting multiple attacks with you know, your leader at 20k is really solid. Yeah, Sin, good. I think play red yellow. I think that's the way to go. Then we have a Reboot Pan here. Shout out to Tim, one of my former teammates. He has been on a tear with Reboot Pan as of late. So yeah, I want to say this would probably be the best red deck if Gogeta and Sin were, you know, either didn't exist or slightly nerfed on the set 19 ban list directly, I mean. But yeah, Pan is solid. I mean, the deck just plays value cards. It's just that Sin and Gogeta are just way more ridiculous. But yeah, for any of you guys who want to play Pan, I know there's a lot of you guys out there who like playing Reboot Pan. This is the list you probably want to go for. Yeah, as far as interesting stuff goes, I mean, a lot of it's pretty standard, but I will say SSB Vegeta Spirit Mentor is rather interesting. This is a 3-drop that is, in this deck at least, going to just kill a 30k ignoring barrier. That's the main purpose of this card. Pretty cool inclusion. I do wonder what the main purpose of this was. I don't think this deck has a huge problem with Slug, although I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I mean, any barrier problem, you just get rid of it. Like in the SS3 matchup, get rid of another World Blitz. That seems pretty good as well. Gigantic Meteor in the best of one, you know, choosing to tech this is kind of cool. So this basically serves as a board wipe. Obviously, you don't get the effects of being a Broly leader because you're not a Broly leader. But yeah, this can board wipe up to 30k, which is kind of cool. Then we have a Reboot Goku. So let's take a look at what this deck is doing. This is actually Scott, who probably wouldn't appreciate me calling him my teammate, but my teammate Scott did manage to top with Reboot Goku. And now let's see what he's doing here. So obviously, Beerus was errated. You can no longer activate multiple copies per turn. Once you use one, that's it. It's in your energy. Can't use it anymore. So that basically eliminates the deck's ability to draw a crazy amount of cards. He's playing 4 copies of Saiyan Synergy, a tech that seems to be, you know, more for the red matchups, where you basically negate with this and they either have to attack it or remove it. Otherwise, you get a Senzu Bean for the turn. So that is definitely a pretty defensive tech. Of course, we have the Whis and the Beerus, the 4 Zenos, because that's your main form of ramp. We have 4 copies of Rose Goku Black, Mortals Begone. This is a cool one to look at here. So, I don't think this deck generates a ton of Z energy unless you really start, you know, using Zeno back to back to back to ramp. But if you do, I mean, this card's broken. Like, if you can get to that 3 Z energy state and you don't really plan on using a ton of Z energy, at least when you need to use Mortals Begone, this card is crazy. I mean, think about the Gogeta matchup where they play guys during battle. You can immediately respond and just put that thing to the bottom of their deck. Like, this is a crazy card against SS4 Gogeta if your deck can, I guess, manage the card well. And I don't know that this deck makes a ton of Z energy. Again, like I said, unless they have, you know, a ton of Zenos to start ramping with, but still an incredible blue card nonetheless. Definitely going to question my friend Scott on only 2 copies of Rise of the Super Warrior, though. I mean, I feel like this is one of your main playmakers where you want at least 3, but, you know, seemed to work out for him nonetheless. And the rest of it looking pretty standard here. This Z leader is so insane when you can get to it, man. Like, this is a scary card for sure. This is one of the scariest cards in the deck. And then moving on, I wanted to look at Amani Edwards' Kid Goku list, one of my favorite decks, and also one of my homies. Shout out to Amani. So, all right, let's take a look here. We have, of course, the 1 Power, the 4 Post. We have the 4 Yamcha, and as far as like main deck stuff goes, or like main engine stuff goes, 4 Goku Lands Unknown, 4 Unison, 4 Bulma, which I feel like is you know, a fine number, but also I think 3 of is fine for this card, just for the desire to fit other things in the deck. We have, what is this, 1 copy of Cooler. Yeah, I think that's a little rough just going against your blue matchups. Like, I think I'd want to have 2 at least, but I mean, obviously it worked out for Amani. Then, of course, we have 3 Krillin, the 1 SCR, works out well. The 4 Explosive, one of the best looking cards in the game and just super, super good in this deck. 4 copies of Great Ape Goku Instincts Unleashed. Yeah, I mean, if your goal is just use multiple of these per game, 4 is probably a good number. I do end up searching it turn 2 a lot with my leader if I don't draw into it. This way I just have it on hand and I can just play less copies. I could play 3 or even maybe 2 copies just to you know, put other things in my deck, and like I said, I can just search this whenever I want it. But I mean, if you're looking to do this like turn 2 and every single turn after that, this is definitely a potential 4 of. 1 copy of Champa, 1 copy of Mira, a classic game ender duo in this deck, especially with Oolong in the Z deck. Then we have the 1 of SS4 Gohan Unison. This card is still so good. There's a lot of times you don't want to give up your Bulma, at least from my experience, but there are times where it is worth to do it, especially when you're on like more of an end game push. Bulma can build up a lot of markers, and this card can just come down and, you know, windmill slam for the triple attacks really strong. Bulma Devoted Supporter. This card's really cool. Searchable with the leader because it's an Earthling, and it's kind of like a T-Blow, but instead of 3 or less, it hits 2 or less, but still, really, really great card. Giant Ball is a cool inclusion. We're in this interesting space in yellow where, like, we're not really playing the counterplay Goku that operates like Riposte, which the name is escaping my mind, but you guys know what I'm talking about. We're not really playing that card anymore because so many things in this format have Deflect, but Giant Ball is a cool inclusion. There are some things you can hit with this. Yeah, really, really cool card. I love that it draws a card as well. Time Magic, I think, is incredible in this format, and then the Z deck down here, pretty standard stuff. But anyways, guys, that's what I wanted to go over in today's video. We have a lot of decks here that you should expect to see at Nationals, so you don't really need to ignore the Zenkai Cups. They are worth taking a look at. But anyways, let me know in the comments below what you think. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.